Hi, I'm Vicki Guile, and I'm here to give you basic information about the Teacher Liability Protection Act and how it pertains to the elementary school teacher. Elementary schools are presumed to be safe places for students to learn. The view held by the U.S. court system is that professional educators will be able to provide parents and students reasonable assurances that children will be safe while under the school's supervision. Furthermore, it is held that teachers have 3 legal duties assigned to them under loco parentis, which means acting in place of parents. So you would be assigned to instruct students, supervise students, and to provide for their safety. However, we all know that situations occur where students get hurt in one way or another. In the past, this has caused an avalanche of lawsuits against schools, which has interfered with their ability to provide programs for students and teachers. What has been the solution to this problem? The Teacher Liability Protection Act is legislation which was enacted in 2002, and it provides teachers, principals, and other school professionals the protections needed to undertake reasonable actions to maintain order, discipline, and an appropriate educational environment for all students. The provisions in this act apply to all states receiving Title I funding, and since Kansas is receiving Title I funding, that means that you, as a teacher in Kansas, are protected under this Liability Protection Act. The Act also limits the liability of school personnel in litigation stemming from torts. So what is a tort? It is an actionable or civil wrong committed against one person by another, independent of their contract. Simply stated, this means that something that you have done or an action that you have taken when dealing with students has harmed them in some way. If injury occurs to a student based on the actions of you or other school personnel, liability charges may be forthcoming. Liability may occur in 2 ways: as a result of deliberate acts, which are intentional acts committed by you or other school personnel, or as a result of negligent acts, which are unintentional, committed by you or other school personnel. Let's take a closer look at torts. The first one we'll look at is assault. This is a situation where you are threatening students, but you are not physically coming in contact with them. Battery, on the other hand, is where there is physical contact and you have harmed a student. Defamation includes libel and slander of the student. False imprisonment is the unreasonable confinement of a student for an unreasonable period of time. Check with your district or school policy, and that should provide you guidelines for confinement of students as part of the disciplinary actions that you use. For instance, you would never deny lunch to a student as a form of discipline. The last one is trespass to personal property. You, as a teacher, have the right to confiscate items that the student has that keeps them from learning effectively. However, you do not have the right to keep these items for an unreasonable period of time. If what you have confiscated is a dangerous item, you have the obligation to contact the student's parent or guardian and inform them of the danger and make arrangements to return the item to the parents. Okay, a deliberate act committed against another person is an intentional tort. However, you must have proof of intent or willfulness to harm the students. Please remember that even though injuries are commonly associated with intentional torts, it does not have to be an injury. It could be a form of mental distress. If you are using an unreasonable and unorthodox method of disciplining your students, and it causes them to be ridiculed or humiliated in the presence of their peers, this could also be deemed to be intentional tort. Let's look at unintentional torts. Unintentional torts are associated with negligence, which is a wrong perpetrated by someone who fails to exercise a reasonable standard of care that results in harm or injury to a student. Now, is there negligence every time an accident occurs at school? No. 4 elements must be present to indicate negligence. The first is the standard of care. Have you exercised the same degree of care that a person of ordinary prudence would exercise in the same situation? This would include acting in the same manner that other teachers would act, or possibly in the same way that a parent would act. The breach of duty. We all know that different activities warrant different levels of supervision for elementary students. Have you met the standard of care required for the situation that you are in at the time? Did you foresee a possible injury and take steps to prevent it in that situation? If not, then you are in breach of duty. However, there must be proximity or legal cause, which means that there must be a causal relationship between the teacher's breach of duty and the injury of the student. There must be evidence to link the injury to the failure of the educator to act prudently. And finally, injury. If there is no harm or injury suffered by the student, there is no liability. So when does the Liability Protection Act not apply to you? It would not apply in the case of teacher misconduct. If your action is a crime, if it has clearly violated clearly established laws, if it involves a sexual offense against a student, it could involve misconduct that violates federal or state civil rights. If you have been reckless and disregarded the student's rights, it could be considered teacher misconduct. And finally, school personnel under the influence of alcohol or drugs would be considered misconduct and would not be covered under the Act. As I said, this has been a very basic presentation to give you information that would be helpful as you begin your year. Some points to remember to ensure that you have a safe and productive school year would include remembering that elementary teachers are expected to provide reasonable supervision of students during almost every part of the day. This does include before and after school times when students are still on school property. It includes your classrooms, hallways, the gym, playgrounds, and other areas that students operate in. Please keep in mind that you should never leave them unattended in these areas. Also remember that the level of supervision will vary according to the age of students and their activities. For instance, field trips would be a different type of supervision than classroom instruction. Please make sure that your field trip is well organized and that you have enough chaperones to provide the standard of care in the supervision of the students. Finally, be aware of your surroundings so that you can foresee any situations that might cause harms to students. Unsafe conditions may be found in your classroom as well as on the playground. So make sure that you have the foresight to look around and to report any conditions that would be unsafe for students. I hope that this presentation has given you some information that you can use in the year. If you feel like you need more in-depth information, there are numerous websites on the internet where you can find more information about the Teacher Liability Protection Act. Thank you, and have a safe year.